Ephronine was the kind of place most people on Earth never thought about. It was small, quiet, and far away from the busy heart of human space. The colony sat on the edge of the frontier, where the stars were bright but human presence was thin. Only a few hundred people lived there, almost all of them scientists, farmers, engineers, and technicians who preferred peaceful work over crowded cities. Too many was a forgotten dot on the map. To the people who lived there, it was home. Commander Leora Dane had lived on Ephronine for almost 6 years. She was not a soldier in the usual sense. She was a communications officer, trained to handle signals, satellites, long-range relays, and transmission codes. She spent long hours in the colony's communication tower, listening to static, reading reports, and sending regular updates to Earth. While others worked in fields or laboratories, Leora's world was filled with screens, glowing panels, and endless streams of data. It was not exciting, but she liked it. Peace was something she valued more than adrenaline. Leora had always been calm. Even during her earliest training days in the Terran Fleet Academy, she was the kind of person who could stay steady when everyone else panicked. Her instructors often said she had a quiet backbone, meaning she held things together without making noise about it. She had been assigned to Ephronine because she didn't crave action. She wanted a simple post where she could contribute without being thrown into the chaos of war or politics. The colony itself looked simple from above. A cluster of domes sat on flat land, surrounded by tall, dark blue vegetation. The planet's sky had a violet tint during the day because of tiny crystals in the atmosphere. At night, 2 moons lit up the terrain with silver light. The colonists often gathered outside during moonrise to watch the colors shift across the landscape. It was peaceful, almost dreamlike. Many people had come to Ephronine to escape the noise and pollution of Earth, or the endless movement of star stations. Most days followed the same calm rhythm. Farmers tended to the hydroponic gardens or monitored soil experiments. Scientists collected samples from the forests and rivers. Exploration drones flew overhead, mapping new areas. Technicians repaired weather towers or checked energy lines. Children attended a small school where they learned math, science, and the basics of living on another world. It was a slow life, but no one complained. The colony was safe and stable. Communication work was not glamorous. Leora monitored all incoming and outgoing signals, updated Earth with weekly reports, and kept logs of data from satellites. Sometimes she received messages from nearby colonies. Other times she listened to faraway chatter from merchant ships passing through other systems. But Ephronine sat far from major trade routes, so most long-range signals were faint or delayed. Silence was common, and Leora had grown used to that silence. It was almost comforting. Despite living so far from Earth, the colony had few worries. The Terran government had declared the frontier low risk, meaning no known enemies or dangerous factions operated near their region. There were occasional rumors about pirates or rogue groups in distant sectors, but no one on Ephronine had ever seen anything suspicious. The colony had a small defense grid with basic weapons, but it was meant more for warning shots than real battles. Most people assumed it would never be used. Leora's closest friend was an engineer named Rafe Talmor, who maintained power systems across the colony. He often visited the communication tower to bring her snacks or complain about generator maintenance. He liked to joke that Leora lived in the quietest room in the universe. Leora would smile and say she preferred it that way. The two of them shared a similar appreciation for the colony's slow pace. They liked knowing that nothing dramatic was expected to happen. Life on Ephronine moved on like this for years. Birthdays were celebrated, new projects were started, old machines were repaired, and children grew taller under the violet sky. On weekends, people hiked near the crystal cliffs or swam in the warm mineral lakes. Artists painted the blue forests, and musicians recorded songs inspired by the planet's winds. The colony felt almost like a small town lost among the stars, safe from the larger troubles of humanity. But even in quiet places, there were responsibilities. Leora took hers seriously. Every morning she checked the status of orbital satellites and communication relays. She reviewed weather station reports and ensured emergency protocols were ready if needed. Even if nothing happened, it was her duty to watch. She believed that being prepared was part of keeping the colony safe, even if danger never showed itself. Sometimes Leora wondered if she should return to Earth someday. Her parents lived in a coastal city, and they sometimes asked when she might come back. But Leora always said she would stay on Ephronine a little longer. She felt at home there. She didn't want to give up the open horizons or the gentle pace of life. She didn't want to trade quiet nights under the moons for noisy cities and crowded traffic lanes. The frontier felt honest, pure, untouched. In her free time, Leora kept journals where she wrote about the colony's daily life. She described the changes in weather, the new research discoveries, and the small problems people solved together. She believed that someday historians might want to know how ordinary people lived on faraway worlds. Her entries were simple but heartfelt. She wasn't a poet. She just wanted to record the truth. Despite everything being peaceful, Leora sometimes felt a strange sense of responsibility, as if the colony depended on her more than she realized. She knew most people didn't think about communication systems. They assumed signals would always work, messages would always send, and warnings if ever needed would always be heard. But Leora knew how fragile these systems really were. A damaged relay, a corroded wire, a solar flare, or a power fluctuation could silence the entire outpost. She worked hard to prevent that. One evening, while she sat alone in the tower watching the moon's rise, she wondered what would happen if a real emergency ever occurred. Would she stay calm? Would she know what to do? She believed she would. She had been trained for crises even if she had never faced one. But she hoped she would never have to find out. The thought of danger coming to HFY felt almost impossible. The colonists trusted each other deeply. They shared meals, helped repair houses after storms, and organized festivals during seasonal changes. There was a yearly celebration when the larger moon reached its highest point, casting a silver glow across the plains. During these times, Leora put aside her work and joined the dances and songs. Moments like these reminded her why HFY was special. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. It offered a kind of quiet paradise for those who wanted a life away from conflict. HFY did not have soldiers marching in the streets or warships flying overhead. It had children playing in the fields, farmers tending crops, and scientists making discoveries about native plants and minerals. It had laughter and simple meals shared under the open sky. That colony believed it was safe because danger had never come near them. And for many years, that belief held true. Every night before Leora went to sleep, she walked outside to feel the cool frontier breeze. She liked to breathe the fresh air and listen to the soft hum of machines in the distance. The land always felt alive in a gentle way, with glowing insects drifting through the grass and leaves rustling softly. She often whispered small hopes into the night, hopes for the colony, for her friends, for the future. She imagined HFY someday growing into a thriving hub with more families, more research centers, and stronger connections to other worlds. No one had any reason to believe their lives would change. No one suspected that trouble was slowly moving across the stars. No one imagined that Leora would one day be the person who stood between survival and destruction. To the colony, she was simply the quiet woman who managed the communications tower. But fate often hides turning points inside ordinary days. At this time, life still felt normal. It still felt safe. Leora still believed she had chosen a place far away from danger. She still believed her days would remain peaceful and predictable. The colony still believed the frontier was calm and friendly. All of them lived under the illusion that nothing would ever disturb their world. If someone had told them that a single moment was coming, one desperate moment where a message would decide everything, they would not have believed it. They could not imagine that a quiet colony like HFY could ever become the center of a crisis. But the universe does not warn people before it changes their lives, and so, the colony slept peacefully under the glowing moons, unaware that out in the silent darkness of space, something was already moving toward them. They did not know that soon their calm world would depend on one woman's courage. They did not know that the quiet life they loved was about to be tested in ways they had never imagined. For now, everything was calm. Everything was ordinary. Everything was still untouched. But not for long. The first sign that something was wrong came early one morning. Long before the sun of HFY had risen, Leora Dane sat alone in the communication tower, sipping a warm drink and checking the usual reports. Everything seemed normal at first. The satellites were in their orbits, the weather systems were functioning, and the colony's internal network was running smoothly. But then, a small blinking symbol appeared on one of her screens. It was a signal from the long-range scanner, the kind that only activated when something large approached the outer edges of the system. Leora leaned closer. At first, she thought it was a glitch. Sometimes dust storms in space caused false readings, but the signal stayed steady. She opened the scanner window and waited as the machine processed the information. After a few seconds, shapes appeared, faint, blurry outlines of objects moving slowly through the darkness. Probably a group of mining ships, she said quietly to herself. There were independent miners who traveled between systems looking for rare metals. They didn't always follow proper communication rules. She assumed these ships were just passing by. Still, she watched more closely. Something about the formation bothered her. The ships were moving in a tight group, almost too perfect. Miners or traders usually spread out, zigzagging as they scanned for resources. These ships did not zigzag. They did not spread. They moved like a pack dot. She sent out a friendly hail, identifying the colony and asking for their purpose. No answer came. She waited a minute and sent the signal again, this time stronger. Still, nothing. Silence stretched across the speakers. Leora frowned. Ships could ignore messages, but it was unusual, especially in distant areas like theirs. She zoomed in on the scanner feed. The image sharpened slightly, revealing long, narrow shapes with dark, irregular heat signatures. They did not match any ship design she recognized. Her heart beat a little faster, but she forced herself to stay calm. Many ships used older or modified designs. Maybe their communication systems were broken. She reported the contact to the colony's small security team. They were not soldiers, just trained workers who handled emergencies and safety protocols. The team leader, a man named Farron Holt, came to the tower quickly. He studied the scanner feed with a serious expression. Could be privateers, he said softly. Leora's stomach tightened. Privateers were not simple traders. They were groups who operated without laws, sometimes helping colonies but often attacking them for supplies. They usually stayed far from Terran-protected regions. But the frontier had been expanding, and there were rumors of new groups appearing in distant sectors. Have they responded? Farron asked. Leora shook her head. Nothing at all. He pressed his lips together and moved away from the screen, pacing slowly. Keep scanning. Let me know if anything changes. When he left, Leora sent out another hail butt again. Silence replied. The shapes continued drifting closer, their outlines becoming clearer with each update. They were not traveling casually. They were moving with purpose, directly toward the colony's orbit. Outside the tower windows, the sky was beginning to lighten. A soft purple glow spread across the horizon. The colony was waking up, unaware of what Leora was seeing. Children would soon walk to school, farmers would begin their work, and scientists would start their experiments. Everything would seem normal. Leora tried to convince herself that she was overreacting, that the ships might turn away or reveal themselves soon. But deep down, she felt something cold building in her chest. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. By mid-morning, the scanner captured clearer images. Leora stared at the shapes with growing dread. The vessels were larger than mining ships. Their hulls were uneven, patched together with different metals, as if they had been rebuilt many times. They carried massive engines capable of high-speed maneuvers. Some of their edges had markings that looked like they belonged to old warships. She recognized nothing official or legal about them. She tried sending a stronger hail, using emergency frequencies. Still no answer. The colony's central council gathered for an emergency meeting. Leora was asked to join them. In the council chamber, the atmosphere was tense. People who were usually calm now looked anxious. Scientists whispered theories. Engineers exchanged worried glances. Counselor Myra Jovan, a woman known for her level thinking, asked Leora, "Do we have any reason to believe these ships are hostile?" Leora hesitated. "They are ignoring all communication. They are moving in formation. Their speed is increasing. They appear to be heavily modified. I cannot confirm hostility, but they do not look friendly." The council was silent for a long moment. Rafe Talmor, Leora's friend, asked, "How old is our defense grid again?" Leora answered softly, 23 years. Last upgraded 12 years ago. Rafe rubbed his forehead. Everyone knew what that meant. The defense grid worked, but it wasn't designed for real battle, just for warning, shots or small debris. The council voted to raise the colony's alert level. It was not a full evacuation order, but it instructed citizens to stay aware and keep communication devices nearby. Shields were partially powered, and the defense grid was brought online in standby mode. Leora returned to the tower with a heavy heart. She checked the scanners again, hoping the ships had changed course. But now there were more of them, at least 6, possibly 8. They were much closer than before. She watched their engines glowing as they cut through the darkness. One ship performed a sharp maneuver, turning with military precision. Her breath caught. Whoever controlled those ships was skilled. This was no random group of wanderers. Hours passed, and tension spread across the colony. People noticed the alert level change and whispered among themselves. Questions filled the air. Who were the ships? What did they want? Were they dangerous? Children sensed the unease in adults and stayed quiet. Workers double-checked power systems. Scientists paused their research. Even the animals in the hydroponic farms seemed restless. Leora kept monitoring. Every few minutes she tried sending messages into space, but there was still no response. Finally, as the afternoon deepened, one of the ships released a pulse, a short burst of energy that struck a scanning satellite. The satellite flickered and went dark. Leora's blood went cold. She immediately contacted Farron Holt. He arrived at the tower quickly, followed by 2 other security team members. They studied the scanner feed with grim faces. That wasn't an accident. One of them whispered, "Privaters sometimes disabled satellites to blind colonies before attacking." The pattern was too familiar to ignore. Farron turned to Leora and said quietly, "We need to prepare for a possible strike." She nodded, though fear trembled inside her. She had trained for emergencies, but she never thought her colony would face something like this. The council raised the alert level again. Shields were fully powered. Families were ordered to stay inside their homes or gather in secure areas. Engineers worked urgently on strengthening the power grid. Medical teams stood ready. The school was closed early, and parents hurried their children home. Leora felt a growing weight on her shoulders. As the communications officer, she was now the colony's lifeline. Every message, every scan, every warning depended on her. She barely had time to eat or rest. Her eyes stayed focused on the screens, watching the ships draw nearer. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat. Late in the evening, an emergency alarm rang through the tower. One of the incoming ships had released a smaller craft, fast, agile, and heading directly toward the outer defense perimeter. Leora swallowed hard and traced its path. The craft flew low and silent, like a predator. The colony's early warning system detected it and sent out a sharp tone. People across Ephronine froze. Children clung to their parents. Scientists stopped mid-movement. Farmers stood still in their fields. Everyone listened. The smaller craft approached the perimeter markers. Leora activated the colony's automated defense drones. They flew upward, forming a thin protective line. The drones fired warning lights at the small craft, signaling it to turn away. It didn't. Instead, it fired a pulse that hit one of the drones, sending sparks scattering across the sky. The drone spiraled downward and crashed near the forest edge. Leora felt her breath leave her body. It was now clear. The ships were hostile. They were not passing by. They weren't confused or damaged. They were preparing for attack. She sent an urgent message to the council. Contact confirmed hostile. Defense drone destroyed. Multiple ships approaching. Across the colony, alarms sounded. Families rushed into shelters. Engineers boosted shield power. The defense grid powered up fully, humming loudly. The security team armed themselves with what little equipment they had. The colony had never experienced fear like this before. People were used to storms and equipment failures, not the threat of attack. The atmosphere grew thick with dread. Leora repeated hails into space, shouting through the static. Identify yourselves. This is a civilian colony. We are unarmed. Silence. And still the ships came. Farron returned to the tower, face pale but determined. If they break the shield line, he told Leora, we'll lose communication quickly. The defense grid won't hold long. Leora understood. Without communication, they couldn't call for help. Without help, they wouldn't survive long. Night settled over the colony, but no one slept. The sky darkened into deep purple, and the first stars appeared, shining coldly above the buildings. But something else shone, two distant lights moving rapidly through space, approaching Ephronine like a storm. Leora watched them with dread twisting inside her. She knew the colony had only one hope if things got worse, the Terran warfleet stationed far across the galaxy. But calling them required a powerful, stable signal that their failing equipment might not handle. She whispered to herself, please don't let this be happening. But it was happening. Danger was real. The ships were nearly inside attack range, and the peaceful life of Ephronine was slipping away with every passing second. Night had fully settled over Ephronine, but the darkness outside felt different now. It wasn't peaceful or calm. It felt heavy, tense, almost alive. The colonists stayed inside their homes and shelters, listening to distant alarms and the hum of the shield generators. The sky, once filled with soft violet glow, now flickered with flashes of light from the defense grid testing its power. Everyone knew something terrible was coming. Everyone could feel it in the air. Inside the communication tower, Leora Dane sat at her station, her hands shaking slightly, even though she tried to hide it. She had never seen the screens filled with so many warning symbols at once. Red alerts blinked everywhere. Signal strength fluctuated rapidly. The scanners showed the enemy ships moving closer, a slow but steady approach like hunters closing in on prey. Fahrenholt, the head of security, stood beside her, sweating from stress but trying to stay strong. His voice was low when he spoke. They've crossed the outer safety zone. He paused, staring at the feed. If they move another 1,000 kilometers, they'll be able to fire at our shield directly. Leora swallowed hard. How long will the shield last if they attack? Farron didn't answer at first. His eyes told the truth anyway. Not long. One of the engineers, a thin man named Jiro, rushed into the tower. His breathing was fast and uneven. The power grid is struggling, he said. The extra load from the shields is causing surges. If another unit fails, the shields might flicker. If they flicker, we're done. Farron whispered. Leora felt the weight of those words. She kept checking the communication channels, hoping for a miracle. Maybe the ships would send a message. Maybe they would change course. Maybe they were only trying to scare them. But all her hopes collapsed when another alert appeared. One of the enemy ships had launched something. She zoomed in, her breath catching. A cylindrical object flew toward the colony at high speed. It wasn't a missile. It was something worse, an EMP charge designed to disable electronics. Heading for Relay Satellite 3, she said quickly. The satellite was the colony's strongest relay for long-distance communication. If it went down, their chances of calling for help would drop to almost nothing. Everyone in the tower stared at the screen, helpless. Moments later, the EMP device reached the satellite. A bright flash lit up the darkness. The satellite's signal spiked, then vanished completely. The tower went silent except for the faint hum of machinery. Jiro cursed softly. That was our best relay. Leora tried sending a test message across the long-range network. The signal sputtered and died. Farron slammed his fist on the table. They're blinding us. They're doing it on purpose. They want us helpless. Outside, distant flashes appeared in the sky. More satellite hits. The enemy ships were knocking the colony's eyes out one by one. Leora's throat tightened. If the enemy disabled the last few communication paths, the colony would be cut off from the rest of the galaxy. If that happened, even if she had the perfect emergency message ready, no one would hear it. She checked the map of remaining relays. Only 2 were left, both old, both weak. They could fail at any moment. The communication tower lights flickered as the power grid strained. Leora steadied herself, keeping her focus. She needed to think clearly. Fear would only slow her down. Rafe Talmor, her engineer friend, burst into the room, his face pale. "We lost 2 more grid stabilizers," he said. "I patched them, but the repairs won't last long." "How long until we lose the shield?" Farron asked. Rafe hesitated. Maybe an hour if nothing else breaks." "And if something does break?" Leora asked softly. Rafe didn't answer. Leora kept her eyes on the screens. She could not panic. She could not freeze. Lives depended on her. Suddenly, a loud alarm blasted through the tower. Leora jumped, her heart racing. The enemy ships had changed formation. They were spreading apart, forming a half circle around the colony's orbit. "It's an attack pattern," Farron said. His voice was hoarse. "They're surrounding us." One of the ships moved faster than the others, closing the distance more aggressively. It released a burst of energy toward the planet's upper atmosphere. The shield shimmered violently, brightening in several places. People across the colony saw the sky flashing. Some screamed, others prayed. Many froze in fear inside their shelters. "Holding their children close, they're testing the shield's strength," Leora said, "and mapping the weak points," Farron added. 2 more ships fired small bursts. The shield trembled again. Leora could almost feel the vibration through the tower floor. The entire colony was beginning to understand how fragile their protection truly was. "We need to call the Terran fleet now," Farron said. "If we wait, we'll lose the chance." Leora nodded. "But we need a strong signal path. The normal relays won't hold long enough." Her mind raced through options. The standard channels were too damaged. The emergency channels were barely functional. Only one possibility remained, a forbidden protocol she had never expected to use. A small file, hidden deep inside the communication system, carried the instructions. The Omega SOS. The highest level distress call in Terran records. A signal so powerful that the fleet was required to respond instantly. It used unstable quantum relays, pushing the communication system beyond its safe limits. It was meant for life or death situations, planet-ending events. Leora hesitated. If she sent it wrong, the system might overload and explode. If she sent it too late, the colony might be destroyed before help arrived. If she didn't send it at all, then nothing would save them. Another explosion flashed across the sky as an enemy pulse struck one of the shield's weaker points. The shield flickered dangerously. Farron saw the hesitation in Leora's eyes. "We have no choice," he said. "If we don't call them, we're done." Leora took a deep breath. "We need full power to the transmitter." Rafe nodded. Running to the power console, Leora entered the Omega SOS code. A warning flashed across her screen. "Caution. System damage expected. Proceed only in extreme emergency," she whispered. "This is extreme enough," and pressed confirm. The system demanded a voice authorization. She leaned toward the microphone, her voice shaking slightly but determined. "Commander Leora Dane, authorization code Aegis 07. The system accepted her command. Suddenly the transmitter core began glowing brighter than usual. The lights flickered. The tower hummed loudly as power surged into the communication systems. Leora watched the progress bar begin to rise, but before it could reach 20%, another explosion shook the shield. A massive energy blast slammed into the upper atmosphere, much stronger than the earlier pulses. The shield bent inward, its glowing surface trembling. Alarms blinked. Warning symbols covered Leora's screens. The transmitter's power fluctuated wildly. "Stabilize it." Leora shouted. "I'm trying," Rafe yelled back, typing furiously. "But the grid can't hold this much strain." The tower lights dimmed. The floor shuddered. Somewhere in the walls, a panel popped open and sparks flew out. Outside, the enemy ships grew bolder, advancing closer to the shield. They were preparing for a full assault. Leora gritted her teeth. She refused to let fear take over. Come on," she whispered to the transmitter as if it had a mind of its own. The progress bar crawled upward. 30%, 40%. Another burst hit the shield, so powerful that the shock wave rattled the windows of the tower. The shield shimmered, flickered, then steadied again, but barely across the colony. People screamed as the sky glowed red from the impact. "Shields at 15% integrity." Came a radio call from the engineering team. "We can't take another hit like that." Leora's heart pounded. If the shields fell, the enemy would rain fire on the colony. Structures would explode. People would die. The outpost would be wiped out. She focused on the transmitter. 50%. 50-4.50-8. But then the power grid buckled again. The transmitter core sparked. A burning smell filled the tower. "It's overheating," Rafe shouted. "If it reaches critical temperature, the whole tower could blow." Leora didn't move away. "Let it overheat. We don't have time, but keep it alive," she yelled. Rafe stared at her for a moment, then nodded and forced the power stabilizers to redirect energy into the transmitter. Another enemy blast hit the shield. The sky exploded in colors. The last stabilizer overloaded. The entire shield flickered violently. Shields dropping. Leora's voice cracked as she whispered, "Please work. Please reach them." 60%. 60-7.70-1. But just then, one of the enemy ships fired a strange spherical device. It wasn't an EMP. It wasn't a weapon. It was a disruptive pulse generator designed to scramble nearby electronics. Leora saw it coming on the screen. Her stomach dropped. The pulse would hit the atmosphere in less than a minute. If it reached the transmitter, the SOS would die. She felt a surge of fear so strong it made her chest hurt. Everything depended on seconds now. She slammed her hand on the emergency override, channeling all remaining power directly into the transmitter. "You'll blow the circuits," Rafe shouted. "I know," she yelled back. "Do it." The tower shook violently as the power surged. The transmitter brightness reached blinding levels. Leora shielded her eyes but didn't stop. 90%. 94, 99. The pulse device hit the upper atmosphere. The transmitter reached 100%, and at that exact moment, the communication tower exploded with light. The SOS signal left the planet in a powerful burst, ripping through damaged relays, jumping from one unstable quantum node to another. It shot across the galaxy in a millisecond, so fast and so bright that even distant systems detected the burst. The tower lights went out. Smoke filled the air. The transmitter core burned and collapsed. Leora staggered back, coughing, the room spinning around her. Sparks dropped from the ceiling. The consoles were ruined. The monitors were dark, but she didn't need the screens to know. She felt it deep inside her. The signal had gone out. She had sent it in time. Outside, the shield finally broke with a thunderous crack. The enemy ships prepared their weapons. The colony braced for the end. Leora stood shaking in the tower ruins, hoping with all her heart that the Terran war fleet had heard the desperate SOS, because now, everything depended on whether help was already on the way. The shield broke with a sound that felt more like a vibration in the ground than a noise in the sky. A deep, heavy rumble rolled across Ephraim, and the glowing barrier that had protected the colony for so many years shattered like thin glass. Pieces of blue light scattered across the night sky before fading into nothing. For a moment, everything went silent. It was the kind of silence that comes only before disaster. People inside the shelters held their breath. Parents covered their children's ears. Elderly colonists closed their eyes, preparing for whatever would come next. Everyone knew that once the shield was gone, the enemy had nothing left between them and the colony except open air. Inside the half-destroyed communication tower, Leora Dane leaned weakly against a wall, coughing from the smoke. Her ears rang from the explosion of the transmitter. Her arms stung from sparks. She could barely see through the haze, but she forced herself to remain standing. She needed to know what was happening outside. She needed to know whether her desperate SOS had worked. Fahrenholt stumbled up the stairs to the tower's main room, limping badly from a fallen beam. "Leora, are you alive?" She coughed again. "I'm here. Is the colony still holding?" Farron shook his head, fear clear in his eyes. "Shields are gone. Our defense grid is failing. They're charging their weapons." Leora felt a cold ache settle in her chest. She had done everything she could. She had sent the Omega SOS. She had pushed the transmitter far beyond its limits, but she had no way of knowing if anyone had received it. Quantum signals traveled instantly, but that didn't mean the fleet would act instantly. Their hyperjump calculations took time. Their systems needed coordination. Their response could take minutes, or hours, or longer, and the colony only had minutes left. Outside, one of the enemy ships drifted closer. Its hull glowed red as it prepared for a direct strike. Residents could see it clearly from the ground, a massive shape blocking the stars. Some people screamed, others froze in shock. A few stared at it with the blank acceptance of people who had run out of hope. Inside the tower, the emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in a dull orange glow. Rafe arrived next, panting, covered in soot and sweat. He looked around at the destroyed consoles with horror. "What happened?" he asked breathlessly. Leora managed a weak smile. The transmitter did what it needed to do, but it burned itself out completely. Rafe's expression softened. "You did it, Leora. I know you did." But Leora wasn't sure. Her heart raced with fear and exhaustion. The enemy ships were readying their final attack, and the colony was on the brink of destruction. She could not let herself believe in rescue until she saw it with her own eyes. Before she could speak, a sudden explosion shook the ground. The nearest enemy ship fired a test blast, hitting one of the unused storage domes. The dome erupted in flames. A shockwave rattled the entire settlement. Dust fell from the ceilings. Windows cracked. People fell to the floor in their shelters. Farron grabbed the railing to steady himself. "This is it. They're beginning the assault." Rafe looked at Leora, his voice trembling. "If your message didn't reach the fleet, we're done." Leora closed her eyes for a moment. She whispered to herself, "Please, someone must have heard." The enemy ships started aligning for a full-scale volley. Their engines hummed with rising energy. Their weapon ports glowed a deadly shade of red. They were preparing to unleash destruction upon the colony. Just then a strange vibration filled the air, a low, deep sound like distant thunder. The ground trembled slightly. The air crackled. Leora opened her eyes, confused. Rafe and Farron also looked around, unsure of what was happening in the sky. A faint ripple appeared, an unnatural shimmer in the darkness. It stretched wider, like someone tearing a hole in the night. Sparks of blue light danced across the sky, swirling into a spiral shape. Leora's heart skipped. No, it can't be, she whispered. The spiral expanded into a glowing vortex. The enemy ships hesitated, their red glow dimming. They recognized the phenomenon. They understood what it meant. Farron's eyes widened. Hyperjump breach. Rafe stared at the sky, speechless. Impossible. They're coming in blind. But they weren't doing the impossible. They were responding to the SOS. One by one. Enormous shapes burst out of the glowing vortex, massive warships. Dark and metallic, marked with the symbols of the Terran fleet. Their hulls shone under the moonlight. Their engines hummed with staggering power. They appeared not through slow approach, but all at once, as if the galaxy itself had opened a door and let them step through. The first ship emerged, then a second, then a third. Within seconds, nearly a dozen warships filled the sky over HFY. Their arrival shook the atmosphere. Clouds twisted from the energy displacement. The enemy ships, once bold and aggressive, suddenly stopped their advance. Their formation faltered. The Terran war fleet had arrived. The colony shelters erupted in cries of relief, others of disbelief. People hugged each other, crying. Some fell to their knees, others shouted in joy. Hope, which had almost died moments earlier, now burst back into life. Leora felt tears form in her eyes. She gripped the railing to stay upright. They heard me. Farron smiled, the first real smile he'd shown in hours. You saved us, Leora. But the moment of relief quickly shifted into a new tension. The fleet's arrival wasn't enough. They needed to fight. The largest Terran ship, a battlecruiser with engines as bright as small sun, sent out a booming transmission across the colony. This is the Terran war fleet. All civilians remain in shelters. Defensive intervention beginning. As soon as the message ended, the battle began. The enemy ships panicked and opened fire first, sending desperate blasts toward the battlecruiser, but the Terran shields absorbed the attacks like droplets hitting a mountain. Then the fleet retaliated. Blue beams of energy shot from the Terran ships, slicing through the darkness with incredible speed. The first enemy vessel exploded in a blinding flash, breaking apart into fiery debris. The second vessel tried to dodge but was hit by a missile that struck its engines. Flames burst out, and it spiraled downward before vanishing in smoke. The colony watched in awe from their shelters. It was a battle unlike anything they had ever imagined. The night sky became a fierce storm of laser fire, explosions, and roaring engines. The ground shook with every impact. Inside the communication tower, the windows vibrated from the shockwaves. Leora wiped her tears, watching the lights dance in the sky. Rafe whispered, "I've never seen anything this big, powerful." Farron nodded slowly. The fleet doesn't lose, but the enemy wasn't giving up easily. They had come prepared for violence. They fought desperately, trying to escape or counterattack. A few attempted to flee the system entirely, but Terran interceptors chased them down with unmatched precision. One enemy ship managed to strike one of the smaller Terran frigates, causing a brief explosion, but the damage was minor, and the frigate quickly recovered. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. 10 minutes that felt like 10 hours to the colonists watching from below. Finally, the last enemy ship tried to escape by speeding toward the outer edge of the system. But before it could vanish, the battlecruiser fired a final shot. The enemy vessel erupted into pieces of glowing metal and disappeared into the void. Silence returned to the sky. The battle was over. Smoke from the destroyed enemy ships drifted across the upper atmosphere. Pieces of debris burned as they fell, leaving trails of orange light. The Terran ships slowly moved into formation, scanning for any remaining threats. Inside the communication tower, Leora collapsed to her knees, overwhelmed by relief. Tears streamed down her face, some from fear, some from exhaustion, but mostly from gratitude. Rafe knelt beside her. "We're alive. We're really alive." Farron exhaled deeply, leaning against a broken console. "The fleet came in record time. Your signal must have hit the quantum network perfectly." Leora took a shaky breath. "I didn't think it would work. Not with all the damage." "It worked," Farron said. "Better than anyone could have hoped." Minutes later, the fleet sent another message to the colony. "The threat has been neutralized. Medical and engineering assistance teams will land shortly." Across HFY, people cried, laughed, held each other, and whispered thanks. The danger had passed. The nightmare had ended, but for Leora, the moment carried a deeper meaning. She had stood in the heart of chaos and made the hardest choice of her life. She had pushed through fear, pain, and failure. She had sent the one message that mattered when everything else was collapsing. And that message had saved hundreds of lives. The Terran fleet had heard her desperate SOS, and they had come. When the smoke finally cleared from the sky and the last burning fragments of enemy ships faded into the darkness, the colony of HFY felt like a place slowly waking from a terrible nightmare. The ground still carried the marks of explosions. The buildings still smelled of fire and dust, and the air still trembled from the echoes of the battle. Yet, for the first time in what felt like forever, people could breathe without fear choking their lungs. The danger had passed. The enemy was gone, The Terran fleet had saved them in the hours after the battle. Rescue teams from the fleet landed across the colony. Their ships touched down gently, spreading warm lights across the damaged terrain. Soldiers helped injured colonists out of collapsed shelters. Medics rushed from patient to patient, giving water, bandages, and comfort. Engineers inspected broken systems and started repairing the power grid. Everywhere someone looked, there were signs of life returning. Piece by piece, Leora watched from the steps of the half-destroyed communication tower. She sat wrapped in a silver emergency blanket, her hands trembling slightly. The exhaustion was slowly catching up with her, the kind of exhaustion that didn't just fill the body but soaked into the bones. She felt hollow, quiet, and strangely distant, like someone standing outside their own life and observing it from far away. Maybe it was shock, maybe relief, maybe both. Rafe came to sit beside her. He looked tired too, with dirt on his face and his clothes torn from falling debris, but his eyes held a calm she hadn't seen in days. He nudged her gently. "You should get checked by the medics," he said softly. "I will," she replied, though she didn't move. "You did something incredible today," he continued. "Everyone keeps talking about how we would have been wiped out if the fleet hadn't arrived when they did, but they wouldn't have arrived at all without you." Leora shook her head. "It wasn't just me. The others kept the tower stable. Farron fixed the power link. You both pulled me out before the fire spread." "That's not what people are saying," Rafe replied. "They're saying you saved the colony." She didn't know how to answer that. A part of her felt proud, but another part felt heavy. She remembered the fear, the panic, the smell of burning circuits, her trembling fingers trying to push the transmitter past its limits. It didn't feel heroic then. It felt desperate. It felt like she had been one mistake away from dying. But maybe that was what bravery really looked like doing. Something terrifying even when there was no guarantee it would work before she could speak. Farron walked up to them, his arm wrapped in a medical brace. He gave a small smile. "They're rebuilding the transmitter," he said. "Fleet engineers are impressed we kept it running as long as we did." Leora raised an eyebrow. "Rebuilding it already?" "They're fast," Farron replied. "And they asked for you." "For me? They want to talk to the person who sent the Omega SOS." Leora felt her throat tighten. She wasn't sure she was ready for that. She still felt like she was floating in the space between fear and relief, but she knew she couldn't avoid it. She slowly stood up. Her legs felt weak, but Rafe steadied her. Together, they made their way toward the fleet's command tent. The ground was uneven, with cracks and debris everywhere, but the path had been cleared enough to walk safely. As she approached the tent, soldiers saluted her. She froze, startled, and looked at Rafe and Farron in confusion. Farron leaned in and whispered, "They know what you did." Inside the tent, a stern but kind-eyed fleet commander greeted her. Her uniform was crisp, and her voice carried the authority of someone who had seen countless battles. "You are Leora Dane?" the commander asked. Leora nodded, feeling unusually small. "You sent the Yes." The commander took a deep breath, studying her. "Your signal was received across 3 relay stations. It reached us in under a second. We were able to hyperjump sooner because it carried a quantum priority flag reserved for planetary emergencies. You saved hundreds of lives today." Leora didn't know what to say. She simply lowered her eyes. The commander softened her voice. "Your bravery will be noted in the fleet archives. Not many civilians could have done what you did." Leora finally found her voice. "I didn't feel brave, I just didn't want to watch everyone die." "And that," the commander replied gently, "is exactly what bravery is." When the meeting ended, Leora stepped outside into the cool night air. The stars looked different now, not distant and cold, but bright, almost protective. She sat on a small piece of rock and breathed deeply. Around her, the colony was slowly recovering. Children were leaving shelters, their eyes wide as they stared at the fleet ships. Adults talked quietly, comforting each other, cleaning debris, helping medics where they could. The mood was still heavy, but hope was visible in every corner. Leora watched an elderly woman hug a fleet medic. A group of teenagers carried water tanks to a damaged shelter. A child pointed at the battlecruiser in the sky with pure awe. All of this, Leora realized, was happening because her message had reached the stars. Yet she felt no swelling pride, only a deep, quiet gratitude. Gratitude that they had survived. The gratitude that the fleet had come. Gratitude that she was still alive to see this moment later in the night. When things calmed down, she found a quiet spot near the colony's ridge. Rafe and Farron sat beside her. They didn't talk at first. Silence felt peaceful now, not frightening. Finally, Rafe spoke. "What now? After this?" Farron shrugged. "We rebuild. We fix what's broken. We move on." Leora looked at the stars again. "Everything feels different. I feel different." "You should," Farron said. "You faced something terrible and didn't give up. That changes a person." She thought about that. She remembered the moment she sent the SOS, the shaking hands, the burning heat, the fear that she might fail and let everyone die. She remembered whispering to herself, begging the universe for help. And she remembered the moment the sky split open with light as the fleet arrived. That memory alone felt like something she would carry for the rest of her life. The following morning, The sun rose over HFY 9, lighting up the damaged colony in a soft golden glow. It made the broken buildings look less threatening and the scattered rubble seem manageable. People gathered outside as fleet officers began coordinating repairs. Life was slowly returning. A small group of colonists approached Leora. At first, she worried they might blame her for something. But instead, they thanked her. One by one, they told her how her signal had saved their families. A mother with a baby hugged her tightly. An old man placed his hand on her shoulder, his eyes full of emotion. Children smiled shyly, as if she had become something mythical to them. Leora didn't feel like a hero, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that they were alive. As days passed, the colony healed. Power was restored. Homes were repaired. The shield generator was rebuilt stronger than before. The fleet stayed long enough to ensure complete safety, then prepared to leave. On the day of their departure, the battlecruiser's engines hummed softly, ready to open another hyperjump vortex. Colonists gathered to watch. Leora stood among them, her heart full. A fleet officer approached her before boarding. "If you ever wish to join the fleet's communication corps, we would welcome you," he said. Leora was stunned. "You have the instincts," he said simply, "and the courage." He didn't know yet if she wanted to leave her home, but hearing those words meant more than she could express. When the fleet finally jumped away, leaving behind a swirl of blue light, the colony cheered. People hugged each other. Children waved at the sky, and Leora closed her eyes, breathing deeply. She knew the memories of the attack would stay with her. The fear, the destruction, the sound of the shield breaking, none of that would disappear easily. But she also knew something else. She would never again doubt her strength. The night she sent the SOS had changed her life forever. It had shown her what one person could do in the face of darkness. It had shown her that even when hope seems lost, it can come roaring back in the form of giant warships tearing through the sky. And as Leora looked at her people rebuilding, laughing, living again, she felt a warmth spread through her chest. They had survived. Her message had saved a world, and she would carry that truth, quietly and proudly, for the rest of her days.